Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at an excellent book that's come to us from Globe Law and Business. It's called Practical Derivatives. You will probably wonder, some of you, what that means. I'll explain that in a minute. It's got a subtitle, A Transitional Approach. It's now in the third edition, and it's come to us from two people who've edited the book with contributions. It's Edmund and Marcin Perzanowski. I hope I pronounced the name correctly, Marcin. I'm sorry if I've got the pronunciation wrong. So I say, Globe Law and Business publish it. Very substantial work. It's this book here. We'll have a look at that in a minute. Very much the style of Globe Law. It appeals, I think, very much to both lawyers and to certainly people within the financial sector. Now, Elizabeth and I have given a title for our book review, the following: For Board Members and Their Legal Advisors, a wealth of practical advice and consultancy on derivatives, now in a new edition, and it's the third edition. Elizabeth has led on this review, and I think she's done a wonderful job in trying to fathom out some of the more intricate areas of what is actually not the easiest subject to understand. Let's have a look at the book first. It's quite a heavy book, actually, this one. It's a hardback, as you can see. There's the front. It's very much the house style, you see, where they have the title on the side there. Then you've got the spine, and then the back. You've got some fairly useful detail. You probably can't see that much of it, but there's a basic explanation of what the book is about, and it explains the basis of the new edition. Now, starting at the back, we've got some, let's see, related titles on derivatives which have been covered. Commodity derivatives and credit derivatives, they've covered those areas. We haven't reviewed those books. There isn't, what you've got right at the back, the way that the Globe structured is, you have details about the editors and the authors right at the back. And then you've got the details of the book itself. There's no index to go with it. What you have got is paragraph numbering throughout, and you've got footnoting at the bottom, which I'm sure you can see. If we go to the front of the book, you can see the front page there. Again, the house style very much of Globe. Then you've got the details there, and then you've got the table of contents. You see how it's structured. We've got various parts to it. And it runs to, as I say, to around about nearly 600 pages in total. And then there's a preface written by the two authors from Mayer Brown. Welcome to the third edition of Practical Derivatives. And it says each edition has accompanied very different derivatives markets, so things have changed again. And then we get into the book itself, so talking about corporate governance and derivatives end users, and that's, again, you can see how it's structured. That is an article effectively commissioned, and it's written, that one's written by Paul Alley, and as you see, that's the way it's structured throughout. And you've got subheadings, paragraph numbering, and so on. Just going into the middle of the book, the same thing there. As I say, it's a heavy book. It's an important book. It's obviously not for a very wide readership, but nevertheless it's an important book. And let me explain a little bit about what this subject matter is about, because it may be for people who are relatively new to this area that they won't know very much about it, and I think it's useful therefore to explain it a bit. What we say is, here it is, the third and latest edition of Practical Derivatives from Globe Law and Business. And having gone through three editions, this book has acquired a well-deserved reputation as an authoritative source of information and advice on the plus points and pitfalls of derivatives, and in particular their use in a variety of company transactions. Very much what we call corporate governance today. I call it company law for many years, but it's now called corporate governance, but it's the same thing. It's about companies and how they're basically the financial moving around of money within the companies. Now, certainly board members and their legal advisors, in the interests of maintaining standards of good governance, we would suggest, need to be aware of the derivatives market itself and the recent regulatory changes that have impacted on derivatives transactions. And it's stressed that corporate governance is one factor that is common to all derivatives transactions. although differing criteria pertain to corporations and institutional investors, as well as to non-profit organisations and charities. And of course the details are contained in the book. And I think it's useful to know particularly about the non-profit organisations, which there are a growing number even now. There are obviously views one way or the other on that particular activity, but they are there, and that's one of the reasons why we need the advice. So those charged with what you might call grave responsibilities concerning derivatives, with their possible attendant financial liabilities, will be glad of the wealth of expertise which the book provides from a number of sources. And within its more than 700 pages, which is a fairly substantial book, it contains informed and insightful contributions from 16 international contributors under the able editorship of Edmund Parker and Marcin Perzanowski. And you have the benefit here of a great deal of expertise right at your fingertips in one convenient volume. And I think, again, that's the mission that Globe have set for us with this particular publication. Now, writing in the introductory chapter, and I mentioned that right at the beginning, Paul Alley from the University of Melbourne positions a derivative as an instrument, the function of which is to transfer risk. And the list of such risks, of course, is a long one, from credit risk and currency fluctuation to bad weather. So you've got a whole range of factors which come into it. Now, as the co-authors point out, derivatives have had a checkered history since the financial upheavals in the years 27 and 8. And since that turbulent time, however, it seems that derivatives have made a comeback. And in the wake of a number of regulatory initiatives, they're now seen to have matured. And that's probably a good thing, bearing in mind the really serious global problems we had 10 years ago. Now, reflecting on the many changes that have taken place in derivatives markets over the past 10 years or so, this edition of what is now a long established book, in fact in the Globe stable, it's been updated with a considerable amount of new material, which we're thankful for. And to complement the lengthened chapter on proposed regulatory changes, there's another chapter that includes newly developed documentation, for example on cleared over-the-counter derivatives. Again, I think of help. And could I just say that the regulatory changes are, of course, of very great significance, and I see no way that they are going to slow down. The way things are at the moment, we're going to have more and more regulation as the century unfolds. Also in this edition, note the standard documentation and market conventions for such classes of derivatives as equity derivatives and commodity, weather and energy derivatives. Interest rate and foreign exchange rate derivatives are also covered, and of course there's a lot more besides in what is actually a very impressive volume. Let me conclude by saying this. Lawyers either employed or retained by corporations or banks or a wide range of other financial institutions will appreciate the information, the practical advice and the reference resources available in this book, especially with its emphasis on derivatives as practical tools for business. And of course, as I say, to go with that, you have the regulatory structure as well, which I do think is of great help here, because this is where the law basically transposes with the financial sector as a whole. And of course that's where you may have problems, you may need to seek counsel's advice. The publication date is cited at the 1st of May 2017, and I'm recording this in the early autumn. Oops, there's I'll just put that back. Here is the book again, let's have a look at it. There's the front, you see, practical derivatives. Spine, basic stuff. It's a heavy book, as I said. There's the back of it. And then, so I just go reminding you, there are other titles in the series which are also worth bearing in mind, which I'll just show you again. And then if we open it up, there are some quotes from various people, mainly from the banking world, I hasten to say. But of course they do also refer to futures and derivatives law reports, so that's bearing in mind now. Edmund Parker has got a chapter, and in fact this is the one I'm looking at there. You can see I've opened it in the middle. This is his particular work. Let's find out what it is. It's the introduction to credit derivatives themselves. So you see the structure of the book very nicely from taking that as a standard text, the numbering and the footnoting. Well, thank you very much to everybody who's been involved in this work. Obviously a large number of people have been involved. It's one of these publications that clearly gone into a new edition, needs to be updated. We're very lucky to have this sort of facility available, I think, now, because in the past there wasn't that much by way of information, and of course we are in a much more informative world with a huge amount of information available which we need to have access to if necessary. So thank you very much to Sian O'Neill and everybody at Globe for producing this work, and I hope it assists you with any of your activities in this particular sector. Thank you to all. Bye bye.